Well, you're tuned into the Zelos Podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder, and this week I've got Cliff Spiller in the house. He's the Director of Strength Conditioning for the University of Oregon men's basketball team. That's right, one of the top 20 teams in the nation. We're going to find out what he's doing with them. But before we get underway, check out my website, rockysnyder.com. Aside from blogs and podcasts and articles and so on, we've got continuing education workshops online as well as in person. And they're good for athletic trainers, physical therapists, chiropractors, strength coaches, and personal trainers. So be sure to check out rockysnyder.com. While you're online, Setanta College might be somewhere you want to go. They've got Masters of Science programs in performance coaching, as well as a track in applied sport and exercise psychology, applied sports biomechanics and movement science, and, of course, sports injuries and return to performance management. You can go to setantacollege.com, enter RS10 for 10% off tuition today. Click that subscribe button and enjoy the show. Cliff, I can't thank you enough for coming on the Zealous Podcast. Now that there's NIL and the NCAA, it seems like professional sports have kind of opened up into the college arena in many ways. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that. But first of all, hey, welcome and thank you for coming on the Zealous Podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. I've been listening to your podcast for a couple of years now, like I mentioned early on, but I'm a big fan, honored to be on there. So I appreciate you, reaching out and allowing me to become a guest on your podcast.
Well, it's mutual. What you've been doing up with the Mighty Ducks and the University of Oregon and their basketball team is very commendable. You've been there for a few years, but before we talk about that, and you guys are in the top 20 nationwide, the rankings, can't wait till I'll knock on wood. I don't want to jinx anybody, but we got the tournament not far off, just weeks away. And not that anybody's secured their spot, but the way you guys are going, sure would be nice to see green and yellow all over the court. But first, before we get into that, you're an East Coast native and
Yeah.
South Jersey. Give me a little rundown of the superhero origin story, shall we say, of Cliff Spiller.
Oh yeah. So I was born in Atlantic City, raised right outside of it. You know, my journey, as far as like strength training started out in high school actually. So for me, I remember my junior year, and I always start with this story. My junior year of high school, state playoffs, we go into four overtimes. And we're matched up with a school out of Central Jersey. I remember playing up against a football guy, player. He was playing basketball. He wasn't better than me from playing basketball, but he was just much stronger than me, right? Just kind of moving me out my space and just kind of, overpowering me, pushing me around, not just kind of like, pushing me around, which I didn't like. And kind of go after the game, I go up to my dad, like, yeah, this can't happen anymore. I got to get stronger. I need to get stronger. So next day, I'm in the weight room with the football team. But I'm obviously doing a completely different program. But I had a lot of friends that were on the football team. My best friend, captain. So that I just started training with them, doing a different program, and that was my junior year. I started playing amateur basketball, AAU, and I truly believe that because I started training in the spring and just playing hard in AAU, that's what led me to get some scholarship opportunities. So fast forward, I ended up going to Wagner. I still, I'm loving the weight room. Kind of have a good foundation going in, so I'm taking, I'm taking advantage of that. Freshman year had played a little bit, had a good team, so didn't play as much. Sophomore, junior, going in my senior year, we actually had a coaching change. So I was very fortunate to be coached by Dan Hurley, and that at the time was his first coaching job at college. He's been a successful high school coach before that, and obviously growing up in New Jersey, I heard a lot about him. Obviously, if you're a hooper in New Jersey, you wanted to play for either his dad or him. So I was very fortunate to be coached by him. It was probably the hardest year of basketball of my life, but very rewarding at the same time. Really just passionate about the game, knowledge. Literally, the skill development was probably the best I ever been around at that time. And believe it or not, most people don't notice, but when I was in school, I was actually a political science major initially, just because I loved learning about political philosophy, just reading up on that stuff. But I knew when I was getting towards graduation, I actually wanted to work in sports. I just didn't know which pathway, which direction to go into. I actually was going to sign up to get into law school. I was actually studying for the LSTAT, going to, practice test scores, things like that. But then when I had an exit meeting with Coach Hurley, he inspired me. He said I should look into getting into coaching. So, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to follow your advice. So what I did was I started volunteering with them. And then when I went home, started working with my old AAU team, volunteered at a couple high school teams in the area. Um, First job out of college, I worked at Apple. So a lot of skills I worked at Apple was just learning how to answer questions, understand people's needs, just think outside the box, be real creative with that. So I did that for about a year and then ended up getting a full-time coaching job just up the shore, right? Kind of in that same area where Mom is at, like Belmar. Um,
Hmm.
Very challenging. A lot of driving up and down the East Coast of Seaboard, but it was a very tough job. And during that time, I needed to really start making some money. So I stepped away from that and then went back home to Atlantic City, worked at one of the casinos at the time. But when I was working there, I started getting back into strength training myself. The casino I was working at the time, unfortunately, wasn't doing well. So they ended up closing, which a lot of people got laid off, and I was unfortunately one of the casualties. So believe it or not, I actually was going to look into getting into tech. My best friend, who I said was the captain of the football team, he works in tech. So he was telling me, hey, you should look into becoming a network engineer. So one of the local community college at the time was offering courses for people who were just laid off. So I was looking to become a network engineer. So just because my friend told me, I looked at it, it seemed like it was pretty straightforward, good money. So, but whatever reason or whatever happened, I clicked back on the webpage and got screwed up. But when I clicked back on, it said personal trainer certification, and it just kind of clicked like that's what I
Wow.
need to do. That was it. And
Wait, it was just an accident that happened?
yeah, it really was. You know,
I love
some,
that. First of all, the diversity that you explored was pretty phenomenal, and
yeah.
yet there's something about the family tree of coaching that I just love. I love finding out where coaches come from and who have been their influences, and to have Dan Hurley being one of your major influences, it's just
Mhm.
quite amazing. Okay, so personal training pops up, then what happens?
Yeah, so I go through the weekend course, I get certified, and then I decided to go work back at the gym that I started training at in high school, just because of familiarity, a lot of the athletes in the area training there. So I started working with like youth athletes, like working with speed, like doing like this Parisi speed school, because it
Ah,
was an affiliate at the time. So I learned that, learned those skills. It started coming back when I was doing it myself as an athlete. Um, and during that time, it was great. I would love working with different athletes, like baseball, softball athletes, lacrosse athletes, a couple basketball players here and there. But I missed that team environment. I was yearning for that team environment. So I started researching like how to become a strength coach, like just reading articles and started reaching out to a lot of schools in the area. So being in New Jersey, I have access to go to Philadelphia, New York, Delaware, North Jersey. So I started reaching out to a lot of Division I schools in the area because in my mind, and this may sound crazy to you, but initially when I decided I wanted to be a strength coach, my end goal was to be a director of Olympic sports for like a Power Five school. I never saw myself even working in basketball. Believe it or not, I didn't even want to work in basketball initially.
really?
I didn't want to pigeonhole myself. I've been around the game so long. I wanted to initially I wanted like, you know what? I want to be able to train football. I want to be able to train lacrosse athletes, softball, baseball. I just didn't want to, be pigeonholed to basketball early on.
Sure.
So reached out to a bunch of different schools. At the time, I was also substitute teaching to help supplement my income. So I remember one day, and I was doing various schools, districts in the area. So I was doing like sometimes high school, elementary, middle school, just wherever I can get a job for the day, right? But I remember I can't remember the school I was substitute teaching at, but I was during lunch break. I remember talking to one of the teachers, and I was telling them that, hey, like I'm inspired to be a strength and conditioning coach. I'm working as a personal trainer outside of this, but so they ended up connecting me to the strength coach um, at the local school, which is called Stockton University. His name is Christian Allen. He actually, I still consider one of my mentors to this day. He actually is currently at Santa Clara working with the women's team. So she gave me his email, and once I got his email, I was literally like emailing him once a week, like, "Hey, I would love to come be a fly on the wall in the training session. I want to come by, talk about your journey, how to become a strength coach, essentially." So literally just like pestering him. I don't like using that term, but I literally just hitting him up every week, once a week, just and I remember one day I emailed him and he immediately responds like, "Cliff, just the guy I was looking for. The Sixers are looking for an intern. Would you be interested?" And at the time, I didn't even have my CSCS. I'm just like, okay, like, what are the requirements? He's like, I don't know, but email this guy. So he gave me at the time the assistant's email. So I email him, you know, we talk on the phone, have a little informal phone interview. Then they bring me in for an interview actually. They bring me in for an interview actually. So then I go in for an interview, and it was the assistant and it was Todd Wright. I had no idea who Todd Wright was at the time. At the time, I was like, who I was learning from was like Eric Cressy, Mike Boyle, Mark Watts, who I think is out of it now. But those guys I was learning from, I had no idea who Todd was, no clue. So
Sure.
and we just hit it off in the interview. Like you just asked me questions about my first job, my family dynamics, and we just hit it off. So they told me at the end they'll let me know by the end of the week, when they make their decision. So, I think I interviewed on a Tuesday. Jane, the assistant at the time called me on Friday and said, "Hey, we're going to push our decision back to next week." So like, okay, cool. So next week comes around. I hear back from the assistant. He's like, "Hey, we're going to push it back to, sorry, we're still deciding what we're going to do, interviewing. We're going to push it back to the following week." I'm like, no big deal. So third week, I don't hear anything. So I'm like, okay, let me just give him a call, see what's going on. And I call the assistant, like, "Hey, just want to let you know, I'm very interested. Just want to know if you guys made a decision. Just let me know." And he kind of let me know, like, "Hey, not sure what's going on. Still waiting to see." I later learned that the NBA is kind of works in limbo a little bit. So it's kind of a waiting game for most opportunities, just how it is. So this is in August. So it's getting to the last weekend. In my mind, like, okay, like, I need to make some moves because I don't want to go into September without having anything lined up. So I started going online. I started looking up like internships, and that's when I discovered, Monmouth at the time was starting an intern program, which was good exposure for me because it allowed me to work with, like I said, football, basketball, men's and women's basketball, like baseball, softball, lacrosse athletes, soccer. So it was a good experience. So did that about 2 months. Well, while I'm interning, I was also still doing like site visits. So I went down to the University of Delaware, talked to their strength coach, NGIT, talked to their strength coach, Seton Hall, talked to their strength coach, strength staff. Believe it or not, during my visit at Seton Hall, I actually get a call from their assistant. I didn't get it on the visit because their weight room was in the old renovated building, so the reception wasn't great. So I didn't see the missed call or the voicemail until I got outside. So I ended up I get a voicemail from the assistant, and I listened to it, and he lets me know like, "Hey, I'm not sure what we're going on, what's happening, but if you don't have anything already, I kind of recommend you start looking for something." So I'm like, okay, not a big deal. I kind of in my mind, I'm like, I'll work my way up. I'll grind it up like how I've been told everybody does it. So I call them and let them know, "Hey, I appreciate your guys' consideration. I appreciate you guys allowing me to interview. And I do have something lined up. So again, I'm very thankful. Hopefully we can stay in contact." And so one day I'm leaving my internship in Monmouth and I'm going back home. And I normally don't listen to the radio, but this time I happen to listen to the radio. And at the time, I hear an announcement about the Sixers having training camp at Stockton University, which is the school that the strength coach I connected with, who I would literally go watch sessions, be in his office any chance I could. He's the one that kind of made that initial connection. So I go home and I tell my dad, like, "Hey, like, I overheard on the radio the Sixers are having training camp at Stockton." And he was like, "Well, you literally had an interview with them. Why don't you just reach out and see if you can maybe watch training camp for the week or help out any way I can?" I was like, "You know what? That's not a bad idea." So I hit up the assistant and I was like, "Hey, I overheard that you guys are having training camp at Stockton. I literally live 10 minutes away. Is there any chance that maybe I can kind of help come by, maybe watch training camp for the week, maybe even help out if I can. And he had let me know that he was no longer working with the Sixers. He moved on, but he gave me, Todd's email, Todd Wright's email. So I emailed Todd Wright and said, "Hey, Coach Wright, my name is Clifton Spiller. I emailed, I interviewed you for a possible internship on August. I'm sorry, this date in August. I heard you guys were having training camp at Stockton. I literally live like 10 minutes away. Is there any chance I can maybe come watch training camp, help out any way I can?" And he emailed me back. He said, "Hey, Cliff, I appreciate you reaching out. I would love for you to come to training camp. Come at this date and time and then give me a call." So I go at the date and time he calls. I go at the date and time he tells me to go. I give him a call and say, "Hey, Coach Wright, I'm here." And first thing he said when we met up with me, he said, "Hey, Cliff, I appreciate you reaching out. I can use your help. I messed up on a lot of logistics." So backtrack. Unfortunately, at the time, he was, the staff at Texas was let go. It ended up Coach Wright ended up getting the Sixers job. And, in his words, it was like a whirlwind, moving his family from Philly, working with one of our best players at the time, getting him up to speed. So it was kind of like his head was spinning a little bit. So kind of kept me on for an internship that first year. And, I just worked my tail off, right? And funny thing is, he remembered a lot of the details from my interview. So I just, did whatever they was asked, like helped out in the weight room, helped out anywhere I could. Then came back I did a second year there. And then, at the time, their G League staff was, expanding. So got promoted, just became the strength coach for the G League G League team. Did that for about 2 years, like in our business, they decided to go in a different direction. So, but during that time, I've networked with a lot of other strength coaches, gone to Combine. So through my connection at Combine is where I met, Daniel Bove, who is currently with the New Orleans Pelicans, but at the time he was with the Suns. So, um, you know, asked me, "Hey, would you want to be our strength coach for the Suns?" So I was like, "Yeah," and decided to do that. Moved out west.
If you don't mind, I've just got
Yeah,
to
yeah,
bump in here. Your hunger and your passion, your ability to be open to change and opportunity is so commendable, Cliff. I'm loving this story because, yeah, maybe there was just a lucky event where you heard something on the
yes.
radio or you mistyped something on the internet. But all in all, a lot of this is you're just grinding it out, and I'm just loving
Hmm.
it. And for the listeners too, you've mentioned some pretty amazing names, and I just feel so pleased and gifted that we've had a lot of those people on the podcast here. So if you want to go to the archives and check out Eric Cressy and Todd Wright and Bill Parisi, I mean, these guys are just fountains of information. And for you to be connected tangentially or deep within, I mean, dude, you are on the path. So, okay, you're in Phoenix, and then you go to what team? Because you're still not in Oregon, but
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
hit one NBA team after
yeah,
another, and bam, go for it.
yeah. No, actually, so and it was with the Suns. So and then well, I'm with the Suns, living in Prescott Valley, which is like an hour and a half outside of Phoenix. That's where the team was located at the time. I'm there for 6 months, and the reason why I say 6 months because that's when the same year COVID hit and shut everything down. So
Ah,
unfortunately, like the G League season came to an end. I was, a lot of the staff and the players, we were told to return to market, was basically be back home where we're from. So my girlfriend at the time, she was living in, well, now fiance, she's living in Delaware. So I go back home to New Jersey first, spend some time with my family, then we go back to Delaware. And during that time, I'm staying connected with like strength coaches, other staff. I'm doing like just sending players training programs. Just, hey, stay, do what you got to do. But during that time, you know, I just felt like I needed to get better, and I needed to find a way to get better. So, and looking back on it, this might sound crazy at the time, but like I decided to enroll in massage school, and they've gone through like the protocols and like everything to make everything safe. So and at the time, I knew I always wanted to be dual certified and had those skill sets, so I can help out in that recovery rehab aspect. Because working with Todd and seeing the manual therapy he's doing, guys, I wanted to essentially take it to another level. Open doors to rooms I couldn't get into just my normal CSCS. So that's why that allowed me to get a deeper integration into the anatomy, and manipulating soft tissue, understand fascia, how to, rehab it,
Makes complete
essentially
sense.
training.
Makes complete sense. Yeah.
Because working with Todd and understanding the Gray Institute philosophies and principles, I just didn't have the time or the money, unfortunately, to go to PT school. So I think massage was my best bet. So, but during that time, again, with everything in COVID, a lot of layoffs happened, so I was another casualty. Unfortunately, at the time, I was still getting, I was still under contract with the Sun, so that allowed me to pay my way through massage school. And I'm just interviewing for different programs, like different school, different colleges, MBA. I still had this tunnel vision to get into the NBA. 'Cause I definitely wanted to just experience working for NBA team in a full-time capacity. So I had a couple interviews, and they weren't panning out, which is fine. It happens. But um, one of my friends out of the blue just said, "Hey, Utah is looking." So in my mind, I'm like, okay, let me take a swing at this. If it doesn't happen, I'm going to really lock in on try to maybe get a college job. 'Cause I think at the time I was getting a lot of those jobs thrown at me. But again, I was so laser focused on just working in the NBA, being in that environment, that I was like, I got to get to, So I knew somebody that knew the director at the time, so I had them connect us via email. We talked on the phone, and ended up getting a couple of different interviews with him, different people within the organization, and just based on my resume and my experience, the people I knew, it was just a good fit. So me and my girlfriend at the time, we moved to Utah. Definitely change of pace, change of culture, but really good opportunity, really good people in that organization. I'm so close to a lot of people in that organization to this day. And it's while I'm there, you know when you're in the NBA, you always get opportunities thrown your way. And that's why I mentioned earlier, like because of my relationship with Hurley, you kind of reached out. Unfortunately, I had to turn them down at that time because I literally was 2 months on the job, and when I'm with you or in the program, I'm there. Like I was loyal. And then a couple other teams reached out, but I just stayed with Jazz, and I learned a lot about just rehabilitation training, how to apply it in a weight room, like isolated training, because I was so used to like the whole body functional integrated training, working with Todd and Philly, and understanding the grades to do that. It was really challenging and really helpful to learn, more like the fusing neck side of things, isolated, training, where I still use a lot of those principles today, like understanding tendon loading and heavy eccentrics and isometrics and applying that to my rehabilitation guys here at Oregon. So I get a text from the former strength coach at Oregon, and just is out of the blue, which is like, hey, do you have any interest in a Power Five job that makes six figures? I'm like, absolutely. So ended up talking to Coach Altman. Coach Altman sold me on the vision that they have here at Oregon. Got out here, and I just knew at the time was the right time for me, because I wanted, like I said, all before the show started, I wanted to run my own program. I wanted to be the sole provider, help performance provider for elite basketball players, especially at the collegiate level. And I just think it was time just to start mentoring these guys, start building the pros. Like I heard a saying somebody said that I love, but I wanted to like start building the statues, not dusting them off. So that's what appealed me to this program. And like I mentioned off before we started recording, just the success we just had, the visibility, the branding, the number of guys that came into the league from this program that attracted me to the opportunity. Just call Coach Altman, just winning ways, winning culture, and I wanted to be part of that winning culture. I wanted to have a definite part in just that winning culture. So that's what led me here, and we've had some success in my short amount of time here. Like we said, we're a top 15 team right now. Last year we went to the NCAA tournament, almost made it to Sweet 16. So again, just trying to sustain that success we've had, and keep adding on to the legacy here at Oregon men's basketball. So that's the story up to this point.
That's fantastic, Cliff, and I love that there's something within the NCAA, where, like you say, I mean, building the statues, you've got more bandwidth to really develop these players rather than
Hmm.
just the last 1 or 2% toward elite performance. They've got more room for improvement than,
Yes.
say, the guys that were playing at the Jazz or the Pelicans or
Yeah.
the Sixers and so on, right? Even at the D League, there's still they're
Yeah.
really a little bit higher than the NCAA on average. So, but the interesting thing is that you. I'm not going to say you pigeonholed yourself, but you followed basketball after a diverse amount of
Yes.
sports programming.
Hmm.
So my question is this: from that diversity of at Monmouth University and elsewhere, and for that matter, the tech field and all the former occupations that you've held, and we can even bring in the massage therapy certification as well. Like, how does that all play into your role as a strength conditioning coach for University of Oregon men's basketball?
No, that's actually a great question, and I've had multiple conversations where when I mention my journey to people, there's always something I took and that's kind of helped me make me a better, person, better practitioner, better coach, right? And I can name every stop and what I've learned and what I took and made me better. And I'll start with Apple. One of the things Apple was, which is always innovative, always being adaptable, always embracing change. But one of the things I took from there was probe. They had this thing called probing, meaning and asking questions was about being invasive. And one of the things one of the things they taught us when working there was because some people will come in with the biggest, baddest, nicest computer, right? But a lot of times they don't really need it. So you always got to ask questions. And I always ask, like, always start with this question, if you don't mind me asking, because that always kind of takes people's guards down. And I still use that with my athletes to this day because sometimes people kind of get guarded. So by you asking that way, it kind of takes down their guard and allows you to answer questions which give you the answer without them being invasive. And another way too that I didn't realize helped me then, but helps me now. But when I was teaching people how to use the software in different programs, they had a thing called sitting on your hands because as people, like coaches or even like people who love to serve, sometimes I know for myself, I always sometimes find it easier to do it for them, but people, if you do always do it for them, they will never learn. So I got really good at giving verbal cues without actually like I still demonstrate obviously in the weight room, but there was, I still go give verbal cues in case I'm multitasking or working with a different athlete. If I see something, um, just give them a description of how to get into the position or motion I want them to achieve. So that's what I took away from Apple, just being able to probe, ask questions without coming off as evasive, and then quote unquote sitting on my hands, being able to give cues and coach or teach without being hands on. When I worked that basketball academy job, that just kind of showed me how gave me a real world life experience of how rough life can be. I wasn't making a lot of money, so how to scratch and survive when I had no money. Not the greatest car, not the best living environment. So just in a way, not rock bottom, but experiencing what that felt like. Right. Um, when I was working at the casino, a lot of people don't notice, but I was working in surveillance. So I was actually watching casino games, watching people's patterns, seeing people who are trying to cheat blackjack, and learning how to play these casino games so I could catch people cheating. But one of the things that taught me, and it's still to me today, is just being detail oriented, right? And then being very observant and being really detailed in your note taking, like, especially when it comes to like tracking or like data collection, just being really detailed and thorough on that. So that's what I took away from that. Um, and those three jobs kind of helped me. Those three jobs, those skills I gotten from that, just kind of helped me in just become an overall better coach and not even realize it, but just kind of identify it. I always try to take away the positive from every experience. Like massage school, when you mentioned that, what helped me with that become more of a better empath, like being more emotionally intelligent, and just kind of reading the room better, seeing how people present themselves, um, and that's part of the reason they told us when you're in massage school, you obviously get better with your hands, get more of a skill set there. But I just think the emotional attachment you learn from that kind of helps you create better relationship with people and essentially help me create better relationship with my athletes. Obviously, like through that, I was able to get ART certified. I know how to use cups. I know how to do Graston soft um, instrument soft tissue assisted mobilization, which were great skills that I use to this day. But just the emotional intelligence side and helping my EQ, that was a big thing that I got from massage school. So every stop, I always taking skills that and ultimately allowed me to become a better, I would say just coach, but a better human being.
I
So
love that. I don't think people take that into as much consideration as they should. Like, oftentimes, speak to some coaches and they want to learn about the finer points of lifting and force plate technology and counter jump movements and sports science.
mhm.
But there's so many other avenues in which to bring in that you've explored,
Yeah,
and with the wherewithal and the awareness to actually utilize those skills that you got from so many different industries, and to
yeah.
find a way to incorporate it is just phenomenal. So how about this? Coach has a culture you mentioned earlier. What is it that you're bringing in your role to just to reinforce that culture, to expand upon it? Are there
Yeah.
certain things that they were like, oh yeah, Cliff is the guy for this because he gets this culture? And
Mhm.
so give us an understanding of what is the culture, what do you bring to it?
Well, what I bring to it is that professionalism, because I think a lot of these young athletes I work with inspire to get to the next level. So coach really loves bringing NBA guys into this program because of just the professionalism they bring, just the creativity, the innovation, the new ideas. So that's what I bring. I bring a level of professionalism. Like I'm on time. I over communicate. I I emphasize the importance of developing habits. I call them professional habits with my guys because when I was at the pro level and you got guys in different NBA life cycles, believe it or not, and the listeners might find this hard to believe, but it's not that difficult to get to the NBA or the highest level of basketball. Staying is. So just giving guys examples, and outside of the training, outside of the weight room, just giving guys examples of how guys prepared. Just like low hanging fruit, getting 8 hours of sleep, properly hydrating, eating food to fuel you. Understanding the scouting report and understanding the schemes and game plan and just bringing that approach because like they already had a good foundation here, but just elevating it through just again, like I said, professional habits, holding guys accountable. Like, hey, you say you're gonna be here. If something happens, I'll work with you, but you got to text me. You got to like say, hey, like I'm running behind, and I'll work with you because that's what pros did. Like they set a time. They normally most like 8 out of 10 times don't make that time, but if something happens, they'll be like, hey, I'm running behind. I'm on my way, or did you just know? So it's just establishing that with the guys because my biggest thing, and I was telling somebody the other day, um, my goal for a lot of these guys is, you know, I want these guys to, a lot of these guys won't play professional basketball, and that's okay. I was one of those kids, right? But I want them to know, like, you might have to work a regular job. You might have to be a father. You might have to be a good husband. So what's that look like? Being on time, communicating, being, being self-sufficient. Like, my biggest thing, I use the weight room to help create, self-motivation, self-efficiency. Because going back to the weight room, like a lot of these guys, they may, like I said, they may not play professionally after this, but I want them to, if they were to keep up their fitness or keep up, training, I want them to be able to go in the weight room and know how to lift and hey, like I had a good foundation, but also that foundation is like sticking to something. So going back to what I was saying, like about the time, and just the communication, I think that's just all stuff you need to know and have to be a great, teammate in the workplace, a great husband, a great father, right? So that's what I try to instill is developing those habits. But when stuff goes, coach always tells the guy like stuff is not going to go right in your life. You're gonna have adversity. We all have adversity at some point. But I think it's the routines and habits that you develop, especially at an early age, and you stick with it, and then you continue on doing it, is what gets you through those storms. So that's what I try to preach and hammer home for a lot of these kids that come into the space. So that's what I essentially bring to Oregon, just that professionalism that they get early on and hold them to accountability early on. And I think I'm kind of like, I don't want to say overbearing because that's not my approach, but you know, I'm going to hold you accountable, and guys know that, so they expect that from me daily, and they're going to get it from me daily. You know,
I'm curious, what are your daily habits? There must be some that are just no matter what, these are the things that I'm going to do. Like, what are your top three daily habits?
well, um, I'm a practicing Muslim, so I pray 5 times a day. So that's one of the first things I do is I pray first thing in the morning, and then I typically will do a meditation. I use Headspace and meditate. Then I usually journal from there. Um, I've been teaching myself Spanish and Arabic, so I've been using Duolingo, so language training apps. And then also I big on brain training, staying sharp as I get older. I'm not very old now, but I'm big on just like staying on top of improving my grammar, math equations, speech. So I use an app called Elevate. So I'm big on using like technology to learn something or enhance something. So that's what my morning looks like. I pray, I meditate, I journal, I do my language training, I do my brain training, then make my coffee, make my breakfast. My fiance currently lives in Baltimore, so I'll FaceTime her. Um, and once I get all those things done, I'm ready to roll.
Okay, you just blew me away. That was none of what I was expecting. That's great. You surprised me with all those answers. Curious, how many days in a row are you on Duolingo?
I go
What's
every
your
day.
record right now?
I'm like 7:30.
Dang, 730 days without stopping?
Yes. And so far I've
Phenomenal.
meditated. So far using the Headspace. I've been using Headspace for years now. I'm like at 7,000 minutes total meditating.
Love it. I love it. Okay, s- that is so cool. Now, you just mentioned your fiance's on the other side of the country, and you've been at U of O for now, this is your third season, correct?
Hmm.
Um, so you must have some tools with long-term relationships that you impart to your athletes too, because I mean they come
Hmm.
from all over the place. That must be a one of those gems that you just pull away and impart on your athletes too, I imagine.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of our athletes are international as well. Pacific Northwest is it's a far place from the country. So we have, kids from Florida. Believe it or not, we got a couple kids from New Jersey, South Carolina, Canada, a kid from Ukraine. So, a lot of times guys don't see their family. So I just try to let them know, like, hey, when you're home, be intentional with your time. Like, maybe not be on your phone as much. Maybe, ask, ask questions of or just engage, ask questions of what's their interest, what interest they currently have, and just take more of an intentional approach to how you spend time with people and your loved ones. You never know how much longer you're going to have with them. So I always emphasize just, hey, like this, when you're home, maybe not try to see as many people you can, but be intentional with your parents, your siblings, your extended family. And because I know when my fiance comes to visit or I go visit home, we try to do stuff. We try to spend time at home. We try to just get as much quality time as we can, and just be really intentional with that time.
Right on. Okay, I'm loving our conversation, first of all.
Yeah.
Normally, we're talking about technical issues of or technical components of program design and
Hmm.
assessments and asymmetries and all the other things. We haven't even touched upon this. It's been more about the passion and the
Hmm.
path of coaching, which I'm totally digging. But I've got to ask, you mentioned earlier about isolating and then with Todd and the Gray Institute integration and
Hmm.
so on. And it takes me to another guest we had, which was Cal Dietz. And Cal's the author of Triphasic Planing, where
Yep.
you're trying to determine when an athlete needs concentric, when they need eccentric, when they need isometric. Like the integrative stuff, I see mainly eccentric loading with compound
Hmm.
movements. The concentric is where we get the isolated, isokinetic kind of single joint, perhaps more often than not. And then, of course, isometric is just, it says it for itself.
Hmm.
I'm curious, coach, how do you determine yourself? Is there a way that you determine, okay, we need some components of all three, and here's what I'm choosing? Does it depend upon the individual athlete? How do you navigate through those tri phases, I'll say?
No, that's a great question, and for me, like I try to take the most holistic, individualized approach in this space, and I think that's how, especially training basketball athletes, that's the approach you need to take. And one of the things for me that kind of helped me determine that was, P3 came out with an amazing paper, and I'm sure that any my strength coach, colleagues of mine or anybody else will be well familiar with that. And it talked about like, hip flexor dominant, stiff flexors or hyper flexor athletes. So I use that paper to reference, and because there's been a lot of athletes, and I know a lot of strength coaches I've heard in other podcasts have talked about muscular deficient or elastic deficient. So that's kind of approach I've taken with my training my athletes. Obviously the foundation for me comes from whole body integration training in three planes of motion on different vectors at different speeds, loads, angulations. Because the game of basketball, right, is played in upright position, working against gravity, using ground reaction force to accelerate our body forward or jump as high as we can, while training in various different lunging and squatting positions. So that approach, it for me, it gets determined based on seeing how the guys jump, right? So when the guys come on campus, we do an extensive testing where we do force plate jumps, we do single leg jumps, double leg jumps, iso squat just to see the force I put into the ground. Then we check, their 20-meter acceleration. We check their hip and groin strength with the force frame. We check their hamstring strength with the Nord board. Me and my trainer, we had many discussions about incorporating some type of movement screen, because through those movement screens, I want to create. I don't like using the term correctives, because I think how the body moves. A lot of people have asymmetries and restrictions, so I think corrective comes off as fixing, where I like to use the term body vitamins, just kind of giving your body what the body needs, and where it could be more range of motion training or just single leg strength training, whatever the movement screen tells us we need to you're deficient in. We try to feed that in with these vitamins, which I'm hopefully looking to establish in this off season. But through that testing and honestly watching the guys jumping and filming it, using some technology to check the joint angles and stuff like that, I determine, okay, this guy falls in this category, guy falls in that category. And also the numbers match that. So I got not only my coach's eye, but the objective data to kind of cross-reference. So through that, because I try to do my best to follow a periodization. I call it more agile periodization, because the sport of basketball is very chaotic, and sometimes in my world stuff happens. What I mean by stuff happens, like schedule changing, the sharing of facilities, typical college constraints. So I just do my best to train those athletes. And you mentioned NIL, transfer portal. A lot of these guys are coming in with a really good foundation already from these small schools, other programs. So a lot of times I'll check an athlete, and I currently had an athlete where, hey, I don't need you to get you stronger, but where you jump, your force plate number shows me that you're more muscular dominant. So I need to work more of a movement based strategy with you, right? So you might need to work on more concentric based exercises, right? Moving stuff quicker, more elastic training, right? Where maybe a freshman or a guy is a little bit more stiffer. Like, okay, like I need to put you more of a strong man traditional style training, where because you need to be able to withstand the demands of the game, because you're playing essentially grown men now. So that phasing approach, I try to do it in the summer in our strength block, where 2 weeks of working on eccentric, just guys that work on that tempo, especially like the I call it the newcomers, a lot of the sophomores or freshmen coming in some case JUCO, because coach has a strong JUCO background, so we always have a couple guys on our roster, and I'm learning a lot of JUCO guys don't get the proper strength training. I can't speak. Again, I'm not speaking on every program at all. I just
No, but on average, I get it.
on
Yeah.
average, yeah. So a lot of those guys, they may be juniors, but I got to treat them as freshmen. So that triphasic approach gets built into our strength block, and then when I get to the preseason, that's when everything ramps. But that's when more individualized approach comes, because when the guys come in the spring and this early summer, that's a great opportunity just to add size, make big, strong, elite big, strong, powerful athletes, but still work on that movement. So I'm always trying to build in some movement, whether it's in the warm up or whether after we do a compound movement, like, hey, like we're doing the trap bar squat, we'll do a lunge matrix after that, just so they still able to control their body, work on that spiritual awareness, right? Lunging in all three planes of motion. And then once we get into this, fall per se, that's when more the individual will come. That's when I kind of bucket the guys based on, okay, I'm going to start feeding you more. If you're a muscular based athlete, I'm going to start feeding you more. Hey, we're going to do more strength speed stuff. You're going to be moving using velocity base to move just at, 0.75 meters per second. Where some of the guys who are who are very elastic, but are strength deficit, they'll probably still do more tempo based work. They'll still probably do a lot of strongman lifts, not as much as like the loaded movement because they're already good movers. We just got to get them strong, working on them being strong at deeper ranges of motion. So that's kind of how I incorporate that. And then, once we get into the off season, I just try, not the off season, once we get in season, excuse me, that's when I try to like just the term microdose gets thrown out a lot. I'm sure a lot of my colleagues use that. I've had some success with it. I was very fortunate to work with Corey Schlesinger in um with the Suns, and at the time Daniel Bull, he was working on his quadrant book where it talks about consolidating stress, so keeping your high days high and your low days low. So that's when I took both approaches and started applying it to the in season, where I'm just trying to keep the main thing, which is basketball, but at the same time, still touch those qualities we worked on, so guys don't feel like they're getting weaker in season or they're not getting as strong or they don't have any legs. And knock on wood, so far this year we've had a lot of 90% availability. Guy, everybody's gonna get banged up, but for overall, guys are feeling fresh, feeling ready to go for games and practices. So again, I try to be adaptable in my approach. When we talked about the isolated integrated training, I was very fortunate to work with Todd and get a very strong foundation in the functional side of training, where we took a lot of exercise that offered a greater transfer to the game of basketball. And then down in the back, where working with the Jazz, maybe took more of that isolated corrective approach, where hey, I've been training the big muscles we got to work, but the little muscles we got to actually do their job too. And I just look at training on a spectrum. When I mean by a spectrum, you got the one side where it's more isolated, sagittal plane dominant, traditional compound loading, compressive loading. Then you got functional training where it's more, sport specific. Maybe it's not loading as much, but you're doing a lot of movement based exercises and different reaches, variation vector, more elastic training. I try to meet somewhere in the middle. I try to blend the two because I feel as though that's the best way to not only train an elite basketball player athlete, but just humans, like general pop needs that too. I just don't believe on being on one side of the fence. I believe on like how I talked about how every job I learned something. I applied that to me as a coach, but when it comes to programming, I could pull up my program right now, and I'm seeing influence from Todd Wright. I'm seeing influence from Christian Thibodeau. I'm seeing influence from Kyle Dietz, Joe Wilder with the 5-3-1. I've been very fortunate here at Oregon to work with Coach Radcliffe, Jimmy Radcliffe, who does an amazing job with the valuable athletes and track athletes. And he's been helping me understand reflexive strength training. So Franz Bosch is a guy I love to learn from, but his work was very complicated. And Coach Rad has made it super simple and applying that reflexive strength training approach to my athletes as well. So I think the overall, you could probably sense, I just try to be well-rounded, not only as a coach, but just as a person. I just believe in just being more of a generalist, not a specialist. Like, I could talk, shop all day, but a lot of times I like, I got a lot of hobbies outside of this that I love to dive into. Like, I've been playing golf since sixth grade, and I started picking the game back up. And every summer, the team does an event. I've been playing more. I taught myself how to play chess, so I've been playing that a little bit more every day. You know, I
You're
come,
crushing it,
yeah,
dude.
I have a you know political science degree, so I will find myself reading political philosophy books. Just reading
I
Thomas
love this.
Hobbes, reading Niccolo Machiavelli, Karl Marx. Like I love reading that stuff. My fiance, she's taught me a lot about diversity, equity, equality stuff. So reading a lot of stuff on race relations. Like so I just try to, just I try to just be as best I can well-rounded as not only as a coach, but just as a person, just having a vast knowledge of different subjects, not being an expert in one.
Well, the fact that you have such diversity in your experience and your knowledge base just is going to invite a volume two, a round two,
Yeah.
somewhere down the road. Maybe after for this podcast meeting, like I would love to get you back on here later on in the year. Have you come back
Yes.
after the season's over and get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah,
I've
definitely looks.
thoroughly enjoyed this. I've truly,
Yes.
I can't believe the time has flown by this fast. But
Yes.
so for the listening audience that wants to follow you, of course, we can go to LinkedIn. That's usually the
Yeah.
best place to network. But do you do anything on social media like Instagram or anywhere else?
Yes. I have X, I have Instagram, but I spend a lot of my time on Instagram. So if anybody wants to follow me, my handle is Cliff Spiller CSCS. And I share. I'm not sharing as much in season because I'll be honest with you, I get so locked in that sometimes I only thing I really post is like when we win, or just I don't do the best job of when we're training. I don't off season I'll do a little bit more. I'll do a lot more sharing then, but in season I don't do as much. But I'm still using it to connect with people. People will reach out. I get on the phone. I love when people reach out. I try to get back as much as I can. That's where you can find me. I'm on X, but I don't really post on there as much. But I'm on there. So like if people want to follow me on there, they can. But the best way to contact me is my Instagram.
Perfect. Well, I just connected with you through Instagram and of course LinkedIn and others, and
Yes,
I can't tell you how much I appreciate expanding my network and including you with this. This has been amazing. Uh, I just thank you for coming on. That's all I got to
of
say.
course. No, thanks for having me. I mean, it was a pleasure. I love connecting with strength coaches like yourself, just sharing my story, sharing the passion I have for this field, and just giving back any way I can. I just try to be an energy giver. Whether it's being being very technical and detail oriented in the weight room I'm coaching, or in practice is trying to get the guys riled up, and it's trying to bring that juice every day, or talking to young strength coaches, kind of help guide them. I'm trying to get involved with some of the other athletes outside of basketball here at the University of Oregon as well. Just trying to get more involved, just enhancing the athletic department, maybe mentor some athletes outside of basketball and let them know, like, hey, like, this is the path I took, and whatever the way you decide. Just want to give you some examples I've done. Say, hey, like, I was lost at first, but it'll be fine. It'll be all right.
Right on.
Well, that brings this episode of Zealous to a close. Thank you, Cliff, for coming on. Man, what a great conversation. Definitely having him come back on once Final Four is all over. Remember, go to my website for more information about continuing education. Check out my blogs. You can find podcast archives there as well. Don't forget setantacollege.com with that code RS10. And check out my book, Return to Center. We'll see you next week.